Welcome to Stories of Hope, a podcast addressing the very real issue of suicides in the Army. Listen in on conversations with soldiers who have gotten help and shared their own story of hope.
Good day, everybody. Welcome to Stories of Hope, where we focus on the very serious topic of suicide and suicide prevention. My name is Lieutenant General Gary Brito, and I'm the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel, in layman's terms, the Army's G1, and I'm the 49th G1, been in a position now for almost 2 years. I'm honored to spend some time with you today. I am very humbled to serve as a moderator today as we talk soldier to soldier, more importantly, my words, person to person, with a great non-commissioned officer and an overall good person, wonderful person, who has agreed to share her story, and others will share their stories throughout in future sessions, to talk about their experiences with suicide, share their stories of strength and resilience. And Chelsea Sergeant Porterfield, I can't tell you how honored I am and thankful for this opportunity with you today to help to talk with you as well, and to share something that may help our soldiers, of which I know as a former platoon sergeant and just a professional non-commissioned officer are near and dear to you, to be able to just help folks. I know it's not easy. So with that, without further ado, I'd like to thank Sergeant First Class Chelsea Porterfield for joining us. And as many may know, she has been a professional military police officer, a drill sergeant, most recently known as serving as a platoon sergeant in the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, right here in D.C., right around the corner from where I live. So certainly, Chelsea Sergeant Porterfield, in my opinion, and I'm sure others share it, you have epitomized a soldier from beginning to end, to include in what epitomizes a non-commissioned officer in our great United States Army. Again, I know it's not easy talking about suicides, and I really do appreciate you offering some words of insight and thoughts for me personally, and for those who may be participating and have experienced or will experience something that you have gone through. So I'd like to start with just having you, if you will, Chelsea, tell your story. Let us know where you're coming from and what you went through at that time. And I will pause X and turn the mic over to you. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. So first, I want to caveat with saying that while I've been on terminal leave, I've promised myself that I was going to do some recalibration and self-reflection on just really the last 20 years of my life, dedicating it to other people in the United States Army, and really kind of figure out kind of who I am. And when we talk about mental health, and when we talk about some of the stigma that goes around mental health, just my opinion, I think that in my experience, a lot of my problems and a lot of my apprehension to seek help was because of something that I imposed on my own self. So going back to asking for help, it was probably the hardest thing to do, or the scariest thing I've ever done in my life, was going in and actually saying what I thought was wrong with me and asking for help to fix it. The first thought that came to my mind, which is why I pushed a lot of it off for a very long time, was I was gonna, I told you so, or the narrative was gonna be imposed onto me, or something I was giving myself was, I didn't want to be a statistic. I didn't want to be a hindrance to anybody. I didn't want to combat any sort of readiness issues. I didn't want to take away from a mission or a certain mission that I was supporting at the time by being a burden. And that really was a self-limiting factor for me. And that was the reason why I just kept um, trucking through the last 10 years of my life and putting it in the back burner, or something's just not right with me, or I don't feel okay today. And I learned going through the process of the darkest hole you can climb out of. There's a lot of things out there and there's a lot of resources that can help you, but when you really step back and you start analyzing yourself and taking accountability of yourself and some of the things and the reason why you feel a certain way, it's really genuinely self-imposed, honestly, in my opinion, just my opinion. I've started to take away or stray away from generalizing things, because it's not one shoe or one shoe size that fits everybody. I know um, leading up to the weeks or the week of uh, seeking help, my memory of that time had to come back, because when you're high functioning depression, when you are a person with high functioning depression, everything seemed fine. Everything, I was a high performer. I made sure that my wife duties were, you know, the best. I made sure that my motherly duties were the best. I made sure that work was the best. My soldiers were taken care of. But at the end of the day, there was very, very, very little left over for me. Um, and not to say that that's not wrong or that's not right. I just know that for me, I was running on fumes. And shifting from high functioning depression to major depressive disorder, or to um, suicide ideations, or to something that you can't necessarily control. And that's what happened the week before I went to go seek help in inpatient. And I didn't understand what was happening, because I knew I had felt down. I think people go through waves up and down, but the trick here is to understand your brain and when it's happening. Um, and I didn't understand that at the time. So for me, uh, I really thought people in my life would be just better off with me not in it. Um, and I wholeheartedly believed that, to the point that a flood of uh, plans or ideations or something of that nature was just happening, like flashing through my brain, and I couldn't get rid of them. At the time, I wasn't writing. At the time, I wasn't telling people how I felt. At the time, because I was a pillar for so many people, or I made myself a support structure for so many people and refused support from other people because of how I am as a person. But putting that off so long, and understanding that as a leader at the time, understanding how statistics work and understanding how readiness was important for mission capability, I didn't want to degrade readiness by seeking help and being one of those statistics, or being a bubble on a slide, or being, a discussion at a health of force conversation. I didn't want to be that, um, until I walked into the emergency room, and it was to the point where I still couldn't even say it out loud. It was probably a good 48 hours before I was able to say what was in my head, and at that point, I was already in intensive inpatient treatment. Um, so I think that once I can, once I was stabilized, that's what inpatient is for, stabilization. So once I was stabilized, it dawned on me. There's a lot of emotions. Um, it dawned on me that I have been successful at this point, and I have been um, honest with everybody except for how I was feeling. And it wasn't until I came out of inpatient and I started another program where a light bulb went off, and I was like, I cannot be the only person that feels this way. I can't. There's no way I'm the only person that has these, you know, these terrible feelings. I can't be the only one. And when I started talking candidly, this is when I started candidly having the discussion with all of the snot tears and all of the ugly cries with people who asked. It came out that, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that has these feelings. And even though asking for help is just the first step, it's the scariest one. But it's once you get past the scariest thing to do is asking for help, it's all smooth sailing from there. And I really wanted to be a better mother. I wanted to be a better wife. I wanted to be a better soldier. I wanted to be a better leader, a better human, a better person. So I really developed and worked really hard on myself throughout all of my processes. The difference between then and now this is a few years later, the difference between then and now is that I know when my mind shifts. And I think there's a lot of people, there's a lot of younger people out there that I think get confused. There's depressed days, there's sad days, there's just blah days, but really understanding when your internal monologue and your narrative starts changing. And that just takes some self-development. That takes a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of conversation, a lot of writing, for me anyway, that's the only way I could really understand myself. And here we are, years later, and I'm able to just analyze everything from all different lenses. But the scariest step is to ask for help. It is the scariest step, but the only way out is through. From Robert Frost. So.
Wow. I think wow is the best word. But first of all, I want to say thank you. And Sergeant First Class Porterfield, if you don't mind, because you are on your well-deserved terminal leave, I'd like to refer to you as Chelsea, if it's okay
Absolutely.
with you. Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
And you said some very powerful things, and I learned a lot as well. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask that there's a term you used, or a couple words you used that I thought was pretty powerful. And if you wouldn't mind, if you could, I would like to ask for you to add to it a little bit, because I think it's going to help me and help others as well. And as an aside, don't feel bad. Many of us have had snot tears before, so don't feel alone on that one. My side joke for the day, but don't feel bad at all. You used something I thought was very, very powerful. And I don't know when at what point in the career that this dawned on you, but I like the term, if you could talk to more on the accountability for yourself. And for what it's worth, a few years ago, I was in an LPD session with a commander, a former general officer. He was retired at the time. And he spoke to the ability of taking the mirror test and passing the mirror test. And I thought of that when you mentioned accountability for yourself, or I guess accountability for yourself. Could you talk to that moment? What light bulb came on, and what procedures you might have followed, for lack of a better word, to have some accountability for yourself? Because it seemed to be a very positive turning point as I listened to the rest of your story.
Accountability for self-accountability for what my actions were at the time, which weren't bad. I was functioning very well, but to be accountable and to be held accountable for afterwards, you owe it to you, and you owe it to your family. And you not only that, as a service member, you owe it to your organization to become better. So when I say holding yourself accountable, the step process, I realized that I was having suicidal ideations and it was going to lead to a suicidal attempt. I'm an absolute type of person. So if I decide something, right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm going to take accountability of that decision. So knowing how I think and understanding that those fleeting thoughts or those thoughts that were pretty scary at the time, going to get help, that was my step. I'm going to get help. Now, through the help process, through the stabilization, through the cognitive behavioral therapy, through group sessions is probably one of the most impactful ways to really analyze yourself and just have a discussion. And you don't even have to talk. You can learn from other people in the group. And it doesn't have to be a group of people just talking about the proverbial, will I feel sad? It's not that. It's a compact of things. So accountability to myself for seeking this. And there have been times throughout the process or throughout the, 6 or 7 month process of, hey, Army professions or the medical side, is this something, do you want to continue service? Do you want us to initiate a separation board? Absolutely not. I want you to help me become better because I'm not better right now. And I want to be at my full capacity like I used to be. That's the accountability piece. Because in my mind, I dedicated, I swore an oath and I told myself I was going to serve the nation in this way. And this is the way I was going to do it. And I was going to finish it however long it was going to take. And I wasn't going to quit. I don't want to say the word quit. That's not really a really good term, but in my mind, that's the way I looked at it. So holding myself accountable, doing the hard work, writing down all of the nasty little things that go on, your demons in your head that nobody ever talks about, painting it, writing it, talking about it, whatever it is, I had to be better and understand myself. And this is all before taking over or going through probably quite arguably some of the hardest training selection I've ever encountered. And then still having to go through that and work on myself. So being accountable, I was responsible for finishing my mission. I was responsible for finishing my wifely duties, to be a mother. So I was going to hold myself accountable. I was going to develop the best that I can by research, by reading, by buying books, by, talking to therapists, by understanding if medication is the right way, if medication is the wrong way. Why am I finding myself trying to sleep all the time? Is it because I'm trying to escape my current situation? What's the contributing factor here? For me, suicide was the breaking point, but there's a lot of foundation issues. That's the foundation. There's a lot of top layers to that erode the resiliency of life. And the top layers are little things. It's all the little compact things. Most people talk about unpacking your rucksack or, repack this or repack that. But really the foundation if you don't have a solid foundation of yourself, you just have to figure out those life circumstances that can erode your mental resiliency to the point where you feel broken, to the point where the only way out is the wrong way out. And I was holding myself accountable. That was it. I continue to hold myself accountable. I continue to. Just the other day, I woke up fine, and we were doing it. My husband and I were doing a task out in the barn, and I was like, man, I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but this just popped into my head. And I was talking to him about it, and I was like, we had this conversation about what was the real reason why we were having this conversation, and why was I thinking about this? What triggered this, or what brought on this onset of emotions, and then talked about it, and that was it. And then we continued on with the task. That's just an example of it's a revolving thing. It still goes. It's ongoing, I guess you can say.
Hey, Chelsea, first of all, I really enjoyed this conversation with you, and thank you so much. And in your earlier comments, it was something, a few words you mentioned, and I'm just listening to you, so I'm not taking notes or anything, but I'm going to speculate it's something that many leaders, from corporal to general, probably wrestle with while in uniform. And those words were pillar for so many. Could you expand on what that meant to you? And I'll say as a senior non-commissioned officer, as a non-commissioned officer, and being a pillar for so many. Hope that makes sense over.
Yes, absolutely. Before going into inpatient, being a pillar, you know, when you find yourself genuinely enjoying taking care of people or helping people solve an issue or solve a problem, or just be an emotional support for somebody. I don't think I've ever been officially coined a mentor or any of that nature, but I do know that being a pillar for lots of people, when people come to you for things, it's because you have a natural way of solution solving. Your people are coming to you for help. It goes back same with the life, your spouse, you're a pillar for your spouse, you're a pillar for your kids. So when you're a pillar for everybody, if you're the backbone or if you're the cornerstone of a large building, really it's one of those, well, who's going to hold you up? Who develops or who supports those pillars, and I think that a lot of people I felt compacted all the way up until I went into inpatient. I said, I'm there for everybody always whenever they need me, but I'm all by myself. That's how I felt. I'm here for everyone. I give everyone my time. I give everyone my emotional bandwidth. I give them my physical bandwidth, but I felt so alone. And that goes back to me not wanting to ask for help because I genuinely didn't feel like I wanted to be a statistic. But it's not being a statistic. So then go fast forward to this last position I had in a leadership role. I was still a pillar and I was still a support structure for the people that I was charged to serve in that steward of that profession. To change, what happened there is that I was able to have a candid conversation when it was needed, when I needed help. Not necessarily help with, life or death situations, but just, hey, this is what's happening, or hey guys, my plate is full. I let you guys understand, I don't mean to be distant, but this is what's going on. That's the difference. The difference before is that I refused to tell anybody that I was having a hard time with anything before it led up to life or death. I refused because in my mind, it signaled weakness. And I didn't want to be weak. I didn't want to be what the narrative or what I thought the narrative was at the time. I'm sure many years ago it was, which is the way I grew up and that's how I thought. But the difference was coming out of that and being able to say, hey, look, guys, struggling here. I don't mean to be distant. I don't mean to be short. I don't mean to be, blunt in my responses, but this is what's going on. These are the things that are affecting you. And then same with my family life, hey, I need some help balancing this because I have to be here at work for these things, but I also need help with this at home. And what helped me with that balance on the pillar afterwards was I firmly believe the justice scale of balance of work and life is fake. I was never able to make it even. There were some days I was killing it at being a United States Army soldier. And then there was other days I was the best wife and mother, but not my best at work. So I integrated them. But I know that that's not an option for everybody. I was fortunate enough to be in a place in our international cemetery that I can integrate my family at certain times of the day. So the understanding and the shared mission, so they could grasp just how much dedication I have to put in and how much dedication I need from them and support so I can fulfill my mission. But I don't want to say the work-life balance is fake. Some people are very successful at it. I really, really tried hard to make it balanced. I just created an integration piece on my last assignment. I was like, I'm going to integrate everybody, but not just my family. I made sure that the whole platoon as an organization could integrate as well. Hey, let's bring your families in. If I don't have the family, I don't have the soldier. Same with mine. If I don't have my family support, then I'm not going to be my best at work. So I wanted to make sure that the whole platoon was whole at the time. Their wives, their kids, their husbands, their fiancés could fully appreciate the mission we were supporting for the United States Army, and then also support their soldier better. It really creates a stronger pillar. It's kind of like putting support beams at the base of a cornerstone, really. Does that make sense?
Chelsea, it makes a ton of sense. Early in the conversation, you mentioned that you didn't see yourself as a mentor. Chelsea, I will tell you, those building the pillars that you just mentioned, and I think you said if you don't have the family, you don't have the soldier. I would flip it on you and say that is exactly what a mentor is. Whether you did it directly or not, just living that as a non-commissioned officer, trust me, you are a mentor. And I will bet money there's someone in your formation that saw your actions and took a little mental note or even wrote it in a little green waterproof notebook that they'll carry over and make corporal and above. So I will give you the check mark and the trophy for being the mentor on that one. And sometimes mentorship, as you know, is leadership, and it's not a direct relationship and an assignment, but you really help somebody with that. That's awesome. Hey, Chelsea, if I could, what advice would you give, even now or while in uniform, to a soldier that may be going through what you went through back then? In hindsight, and what you know and what you experienced, the great words of what I'll call mentorship that you just mentioned, what would you offer a soldier, regardless of their rank, or even a family member that may be going through now what you went through back then?
I think this would be my call to action, so to speak, words of advice. If you're just not feeling right, if you notice things are shifting in how you perceive situations, if your empathy has changed to apathy, if your compassion has changed to comparison, then I challenge you to sit back and figure out, or have a conversation with yourself and ask what questions. What in my life has created me to think this way? Or what about this has caused me to look at something different? And if that doesn't work, there's always military health support. That's where I went. It's scary, but I think people need to understand what life circumstances are versus life and death situations are. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with sitting down and having a candid conversation with a leader, or it doesn't even have to be someone in position in charge of you. It could be someone subordinate to you. I've had many PSCs, private sergeants that I considered people that I would go to for advice in life, just because I enjoyed their advice, their life advice. That would be my call to action. Really, if you're feeling this way and you've noticed your empathy is apathy, your compassion is now comparison, you need to take a step back look at your situation, your surroundings. If you have to ask for help, do it. It's scary. Ask for help. When you ask for help, now you have to hold yourself accountable for asking help. It's kind of like applying for a job and not following through with the interview. You have to continue to go, and you have to continue to research, and you have to continue to develop. Because if you don't, you're not going to, you're shortchanging yourself and you're shortchanging your family.
Wow, Chelsea, that's so powerful is an understatement. It's a big and powerful and helpful as well. If you have an opportunity after you finish working in the barn with the family and stuff, maybe a couple of months down the line, just sit down and write a book. This is awesome. What you're offering is very helpful. You talked about your husband a couple of times. While in uniform, and even now, when you were going through what you did go through, who else is in your support circle? Did they reach to you? Did you reach to them, or just kind of the opportunity fell on you? But I really appreciate how you mentioned how at some point after seeing yourself and the accountability for yourself, what I really respected that you illustrated was accepting the support that was around you, whether it's through military life support, I think you mentioned that, and others. Did you have people that were helpful in your circle?
So I did. I didn't think that I was going to at first because that self-imposed narrative. It's not something that was ever said to me. It's just something I firmly believed in my mind. So it was something self-imposed. Oddly enough, or amazingly enough, what happened is my husband, while he was in uniform, and he and I are both old. We grew up in the early 2000s, the OIF ARFAGEN cycle. So when it comes to mental resiliency, it's imposed. Like, you just develop it. It's not something that you have time to think about or work on. It's just there, only because it's mission, deploy, redeploy, deploy, redeploy, and that was the life. So whenever I chose to ask for help, my husband saw what I was going through, and he in turn also asked for help. So while we're both going through this, we're both developing through what would be a hard time. My surprise was that when I came out of inpatient and I was able to ask to speak to my command leadership in the regiment, they were extremely supportive. And being an MP and being assigned to an infantry regiment for the first time in my life, I did not assume that it was going to be received well, but it was received extremely well, and it was very supportive. But that goes back to me as a soldier, holding myself accountable, and then them supporting me through my accountability process. So it's a bit different, if you're going to sign a contract and then not follow through with the contract. I signed a contract to get help, and I wanted to be a better person. So they were going to help me be a better person, be a better leader, be a better mom, just be a better human. And it was extremely supportive. My regimental command team was extremely supportive. My battalion command team, my company command team, my tomb guards were extremely supportive before, during, and after all of it. So I didn't think that I was going to have a support system or a support structure, but luckily I proved myself wrong. And by having the candid conversations with people and just being completely open about everything, helped not only other people, but it helped them help me.
No, thanks, Chelsea. And putting my G1 hat on, and also as the staff lead for the regulations, and working some stuff with leader development with exactly what you just said, and the regimental leadership being supportive, your fellow tomb soldiers being supportive. It really warms my heart to hear that. And it's a command climate and a leadership climate And I hope we can just share across the Army all three components. That's very, very powerful. You really gave me, and again, in the G1 had a lot of good things to think about that as we work programs and regulations, which are not the end all solution, but part of it. And then to use a geeky word on you, infuse it on down to the lowest level. You gave me a lot of ideas, things to think about. Chelsea, I'll be honest with you, I care a lot, and I know many others do as well, to do all we can to lower, if not eliminate, suicides, but the things that impact it. If I'll ask a risky question on my behalf, what do you think we can do better as an enterprise, as a big Army, even if it's just something at the squad and platoon level?
So I think a lot of the dynamics different at the tactical level. There's personality conflicts. So there's one organization or one platoon or one squad could be completely different than another. There could be character conflicts, there could be personality conflicts, there could be, a lot of contributing factors that would prohibit somebody from going and seeking help. While I've been on terminal leave, I've been fortunate enough to help facilitate some expertly, some resiliency group Zoom calls with some civilian organizations. And that's one thing I was telling my husband. I was like, we talked about group therapy. And I know group therapy, when you talk about group therapy, we're like, oh my God, group therapy, sit around and woe is me. It's not it. That's not it at all. It could be a group discussion on life situations, or just listening in on group discussions for life situations. I don't know if it's a separate program. I don't know if it's an opportunity for someone to, log into a resiliency group discussion. If Alpha team leader doesn't like Bravo team leader, naturally the conversation in a squad dynamic isn't going to come to fruition, or isn't going to be successful, or isn't going to be productive. But if somebody who has the same mentality that I did, where I wasn't going to talk about my problems with anybody, but if I was able to sit into a room with like 50 or 100 other people virtually that are talking about all of these life things, like, my wife is doing this, or my husband's doing this, or whatever, and listen to, a life coach or a resiliency coach. I know we talk about leadership being if you're a leader, you're kind of a life coach, really. So, but outside of the organization, an unbiased feedback, I think that would help people. A lot of people don't want to look at therapy as an option, but listening to other people's problems and realizing that there is a connection, that I can relate to that situation, and this is how they're fixing theirs. Maybe if I apply that technique to mine, then I will be successful, right? It doesn't have to be a conversation. It doesn't have to be a group discussion. It could just be an opportunity to listen to other people's problems and then gain knowledge from them, kind of like what you're doing on the podcast. So I don't know about policy. I just know that at the tactical level, there's lots of character conflicts and personality conflicts that sometimes, junior soldiers just can't put aside. So I don't know if that answered. That's kind of a tangent. So I apologize.
No issues at all. No apologies necessary. And yes, it does. And I can relate to the tactical level. Well, I'm going to switch titles here, and I would like to close with Sergeant First Class Chelsea Porterfield. Thank you for your service. And please know that in uniform and out, you made a difference. And I'm not just saying that. I'm very sincere about it. Your words today and your story was very powerful. And I personally can't thank you enough for sharing your thoughts and story with us today, in hopes that somebody listening will really benefit from it. And I will bet that they will. And I did personally. And if they need help, they know how to get it. And we can help them with that as well. So if you're listening and you feel like you need help, I encourage you to call the military crisis line at 1-800-273-8255. 8255 or 1-800-273-TALK, TALK, and press 1. Or you can text 838-255, 838-255. This call is free and is confidential, and there are people 24/7 ready to assist. So Sergeant First Class Porterfield, again, thank you so much. Please do stay tuned for our next episode of Stories of Hope. Again, I'm Gary Brito, the Army G1, and thank you for your participation, interest, and listening. Have a great day.
Stories of Hope, brought to you by the Army Resiliency Directorate and the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel.